I'm Jeffrey Pickette, and welcome to this episode of Stoughton Spotlight. We're continuing our Conversations with the Candidates series, where I'll be interviewing both candidates running for the Board of Selectmen in this April's town election cycle. The April 2019 town election features two candidates running for a single seat on the Board of Selectmen, and on this episode, I'm joined by incumbent member of the Board of Selectmen, Rick Hill. Rick, thanks for joining me.
Well, thank you, Jeff. I appreciate the opportunity to come and chat.
So, right off the get-go, I like to ask, why you're running for re-election, and to share some of your thoughts and platforms for the next 3 years if you're elected.
Yeah, excellent question. So, this particular board has done an awful lot of work to try and catch up. So we felt there was a lot of projects that had been on the table for a long, long time, and we felt the need to move those projects forward. Primarily because the taxes don't get any less, the conditions of the buildings don't improve unless you take action and do something about it. So we feel compelled to act on that, and we've made a lot of progress. So when we first came into office, when I first came into office, it was pretty much of a sprint. So we were meeting, as you probably know, 2 or 3 times a week for months, and that's because there's just so much work to be done. We now meet monthly. I think what was prescribed was every first and third Tuesday of the month or something for the selectmen to meet, but we just not to get what we need done, we can't meet. We need to meet weekly. So, like this week is there were 2 meetings. So we keep working on moving the agenda ahead. So a lot of the things that we need to focus on are economic development issues and the business of the town. And the economic development issues tie back to the master plan, which is my and our guide. So the town residents, voted for this plan, spent an awful lot of money on the plan. It's not to be sitting on a shelf. We, embrace, what the town folks spoke to in that plan. So, professionals are hired, consultants are hired to come in to interview the town's folks and do visioning sessions to get the feedback of what the Stoughton residents wanted for their town and produce this document. And there are 2 pieces to the document. One is the overall master plan, and then a subset of that is the economic development piece of it. In addition to that, the Redevelopment Authority, on their own initiative, also undertook a study of the downtown about what actions needed to be taken to bring that area back. We've identified 4 economic development zones in the town. Downtown's one of them, and we've been very active in trying to enact the strategies that were described to bring that area back. One of the first things we took on was the vacant building down there that had been the subject of a fire, and it's sat for 10 years since that fire happened, and we had just gotten to a point of frustration where it was not just merely an economic development inhibitor, it was a morale issue for the town. So we did a forum last summer on the downtown for the public to come in, tell us what you think, what do we need to do. We then put that particular piece of property on an agenda for the Board of Selectmen to take up and discuss to see what actions we had available to us to move the project forward, because we absolutely intended to either move that project forward or exercise the other options that we might have. And sure enough, the night of that agenda item, the contractor came in and the planning board folks came in, and we got together, and I think actually Dan Kelly had orchestrated a meeting the week before. So it was very productive, and now we have construction documents. The issues that were stopping that project for so long have been resolved, and it is moving forward now. But it was, again, years. But we just felt committed to getting that piece done. We bought the Randall Savings Bank. We did that because the economic development plan said what's critical to the downtown development was green space, amongst other things. The suggestion was that the post office could be relocated, and that whole area over there would become green space. And just think about that with an outdoor gazebo and bands at night and pretty cool stuff. And then the storefronts that back up to that would then, be prime areas for development because, patios and decks and things off of that. And so, that one piece was specifically important. So the bank was bought because, number one, it came with 30 additional parking spots right on the downtown that we needed. And then it was turnkey space, for retail banking, retail mail work that they needed done. So we're still working through all of that.
So you have, I think this kind of provides an opportunity to jump into, bring up like a philosophical difference I sense among residents in town about how to approach the downtown, whether it's to allow private development and to help spur private development, or to have a more active government approach where you're actually acquiring the parcels of land that you have identified to be the keys to revitalizing the downtown, namely, as you mentioned, Randolph Savings Bank, the post office, and I'll throw in the train depot and the State Theater there because those are also have been on your agenda in executive session and other meetings to discuss. People are leery of spending tax dollars on private property and kind of taking that off the tax roll, so to speak. So I just want you to talk about that philosophy of having a government-driven revitalization as opposed to private development.
Sure. And we've heard this question from the folks as well as early as yesterday. So one of the things we're doing is we've rolled out a series of property tax relief or assistance programs that we're conducting this week for taxpayers. To point out all the programs that are available to them. But stepping back, I'm not a big government guy. Less is more as far as I'm concerned. But there are some things that needed to take place to spur the development in the downtown. So we just talked about the bank. We've talked about the post office. The post office we have a grant for. And again, we think that there are other funds available for us to use. Every project that we're taking on, and I know that's the scary piece. It's like, oh my God, we're spending ourselves into the next century. Every project we take on, for the most part, we are finding alternate or parallel sources of funding. The bank was, a gift or a grant from half of that was from the Redevelopment Authority. So they kicked in $300,000 or $350,000 to that project. The railroad depot was already approved by town meeting. So there were two separate articles way back when by town meeting, number one to acquire, and number two to renovate. In the meantime, I think just last week or the week before, we just got another grant for the railroad station. So there's an article at this upcoming town meeting to take those two articles, put them together towards the purchase and renovation, and use all that money to bring it up to speed so that it can become a facility that would attract outside businesses to come and occupy and add back to the tax rolls. That railroad station's really never been on the tax roll, so that'd be a great addition back. But the State Theater came up on our radar last fall, and again, key component of both the master plan and the Redevelopment Authority commissioned plan on the downtown. Both called to the State Theater to be kind of a centerpiece and an anchor for bringing or attracting businesses to the downtown. That, again, came in front of us because of kind of a quasi-emergency where, the understanding was that potentially that theater was going to be lost, potentially demolished, and again, we do not want to be in the land business. We do not want to be, owning and managing buildings. But it did make sense to step in and take a look at that. If we acquired the building, our sense was that we'd then put an RFP out to bring in a management company to then fundraise to get the capital needed to finish off that building and put it back into the tax rolls. And then eventually it would also reimburse the town. Actually, I think the CPA was was considering funding that. Again, not taxes from the town. This is, again, alternate sources of funding. So most of the projects we look at, we're not looking at impacting the taxpayers at all, if at all. So somebody said, well, public safety facility. Yeah, we need to do something about the Freeman Street fire station. It is in need of replacing. It has been for a long time. So now we're stuck in this quagmire of spending money on it every year to kind of make it livable, and it's good money after bad. So, and because we've kicked the can down the road so far, every year it costs us more money.
Well, what do you do about that? Do you look, because at town meeting, the special town meeting this past November, the article that would have studied where to put a potential public safety, police and fire building was, if I'm not mistaken, withdrawn.
Mm-hmm.
There didn't seem to be a consensus of support from the town meeting body. So are you going to maybe revisit the scope of the project, just do the fire station, or try to go at it again with both police and fire? How do you kind of tackle that, knowing that town meeting was not in favor of the last proposal?
Well, I can't say that town meeting was in favor or not in favor, right? So I know that there was, an informal, raise of hands, and I don't believe that that's representative of what's going on. I think that the town recognizes there's a need for Fire Station 1, and now there's a question about, well, what should we do about the police station? So, we stepped back. Our sense of urgency was, again, the footprint you would need for a parcel of land to accommodate all the specifications to accommodate a public safety facility are pretty unique. So when you look at the town, the spaces that are available are only so many. And we felt that, that's going to be probably a perishable supply over time. Those parcels get sold and they're not available to you anymore, and the prices go up, and that's been our legacy. We get to the point where we don't make decisions on things because we just don't have enough information, or it just seems insurmountable. So in this particular case, we stepped back and said, well, let's follow the same process we did for the high school. And we will do a feasibility study on both facilities and let them come back and tell us, should we tear down and rebuild? Should we relocate? Should we renovate? Should we, again, look at all the options that are available to us, which was the logical, methodical, step-by-step process we did with the high school. Again, our sense of urgency was finding and citing locations as a beginning part, but every year for the fire station alone, we're going to spend another, I think, $5 million in the facilities master plans was subscribed just for that building, and that's what, a fifth of the cost of a new facility, so combined facility. So again, financial business decision. What's the right thing to do? And also for our firefighters and police officers and our public safety officials, they need a good working and livable environment. They need the tools to do their job, and we're absolutely committed to do that. So
going up, let's go away from the center. We'll go up Park Street, and we'll go to the Ash Street area and the camp. We'll go around to Turnpike Street, Campanelli Park Industrial area with the Park Street Sewer Project. That's been a popular topic of discussion, and it's come up now and again the last several years, but there was a meeting in January where the Economic Development Office, Town Engineer's Office really tried to make a push for the project. The residents in the room from the area were adamantly opposed to the project. So where do you, taking that into account, what's your thoughts on the project, and how do you sell it to a populace that's largely, I would say, against, at least the people who come and speak at the meetings representing that neighborhood are against the project?
Yeah. So again, great question. Our job one is to provide public safety and the needs of the town and To do that, we need to spur economic development. We just cannot be raising taxes, and we haven't. People have said, well, our tax bill went up. Well, it's because the property appreciated, not because there was any tax increase. So, and then the tax for the debt exclusion for the high school is also there now. So, those are things that are on people's minds. So we're trying to figure out what we can do to offset that, which is why we're having those forums this week on property tax assistance. But back to your question, economic development's important. That sewer down Park Street, that sewer line down into Campanelli will help that area grow significantly. And we have looked at this from a bunch of different views. I think that the initial thought from the residents, and it's always been, because we've done a terrible job of trying to communicate with them and telling them how we were going to pay for this, out of the box, it was these massive betterments for $20,000 or $30,000, and I never thought that was the way to go. I thought that if that economic development is going to benefit the whole town, then maybe the town should share in that. But then we asked the town engineer, the assessor, the treasurer, town accountant to step back, and the DPW, the Department of Water and Sewer, to do a financial assessment. What is the return on that investment of between $9 and $13 million, depending on what you do? And they came back and said, well, with the increase in development that will occur because of that, and the increase in the tax base, because now you've made all that property along that route more valuable, and oh, by the way, you're going to get water and sewer revenue. So the consensus was the project would pay for itself without any benefits, without any betterments or other town-provided sources of funding. So it seems to be a no-brainer, and I think people came to that meeting. My sense is that, oh, we're going to get hit with a betterment, and the people that showed up were the people that were, not really interested in a betterment. And then there was a question about the traffic, particularly at the intersection of Park and Turnpike,
right,
where Campanelli is, and that certainly makes sense. But in my mind, that's a separate issue, and we have different vehicles to approach that. So there are grants available to us to take a look at that and do a study and figure out what the right traffic design is down there, because it's a problem today.
Is it possible next time you do this to maybe factor that in? I heard at that meeting people were upset there were no sidewalks in that area of Turnpike Street, which there aren't, and maybe taking that all into consideration when will you be repitching this, I should say, to those residents again before going to town meeting?
I think we'll do another public forum. Mm-hmm. So now we've collected the data that speaks to the residents' concerns that are in that area, and the business owners, by the way. The business owners are the ones that came to us before, years ago, said, we need help. And, we would like sewer down there, and how can how can we help? We're, committed financially to do this, et cetera. So we're looking at trying to satisfy all aspects. And of course, commercial industrial pay a much higher percent of taxes in the town. So, we're trying to appeal to everybody here. We don't want it to impact, the residents along that route. So, I think, again, now that we've gathered this data, we'll come back and do another public forum. But from an economic development standpoint, from a pure business standpoint, it just seems to me that makes the right decision to see what we can do to make that project happen.
Want to switch gears, but along the same lines of selling maybe an unpopular decision to the public. I want to talk about the topic of discussion at this week's Board of Selectmen meeting, the March 4th Board of Selectmen meeting, the settlement with former town manager Michael Hartman. And $125,000, about half would be paid through insurance, half would be paid the tax rolls. So it just kind of walk me through that decision process, because a resident might say, wait a minute, the town won in court twice. Why not wait and win again the third time when it's on, when Mr. Hartman is appealing this case?
So, again, another great question, Jeff. The proposed settlement, there's been no agreement to settle this case yet at the moment. So the Board of Selectmen, their job was to defend the town. So there really haven't been two cases decided. One was an injunction that was filed by Mr. Hartman to continue to work in the town while the other legal pieces were being worked out. There was a lawsuit which was also adjudicated. So the town's job, our job, was to defend the town, and we did that, and we won. So regardless of how I might feel about whether the actions taken regarding this town manager were right or wrong or indifferent, the job of the Board of Selectmen, any Board of Selectmen whoever was sitting there, was going to have to be to defend the town, and we did. So now Mr. Hartman has appealed, resets the clock. An appeal means that now you're not in front of one judge, you're in front of three judges. You're now not dependent or looking at a judgment from just one judge, but now it's if he exercises his right, a jury of his peers. So it complicates the issue. So by the time, we brought in another firm, Myrick O'Connell, to give us a separate opinion, reconstruct the scene of the crime, and figure out what's going on. And they then brought in an arbiter who is a recently retired appellate court judge who's been was on the bench for 30 years. So he is intimately familiar with the appeals court process, et cetera. Myrick O'Connell, the attorney that was representing this particular gentleman, is past president of the New England Bar, of the Massachusetts Bar. He's been a super lawyer, so he's well credentialed. He's done a lot of these cases. So we feel like at least we've got the right information to work with. We made the decision Monday to release his findings and report and recommendations as a public record. So now we're at the point of making a business decision. So this has nothing to do with assigning blame or who was right or who was wrong. It's a business decision. So the thought was that the projection was that if the appeals pursued, it would probably take to the end of 2020 to resolve. And again, the clock is ticking on accrued lost wages and et cetera. By that time, the lost wages would be somewhere north of $750,000 to $1 million, and then forward wages, which is future earnings and things of that nature. The estimate from the firm was upwards of $2.5 to $3 million. So we've got to decide: do we spend $65,000 of taxpayers' money today without acknowledging whoever was right or wrong on this thing to settle the issue and move forward and leave this behind us, or do we pursue defending the appeal and potentially end up owing $1 to $3 million? And if that happened, where would that money come from? There's no insurance for that, so it's a gamble. And at the end of the day, so our job was to collect up the best available data that we had, consult with experts, and work with all parties to figure out, if there was a reasonable next step to take here. And that's the junction that we're at. So,
if you look at the figure, it's less than what Michael Hartman made in a year of salary.
mm-hmm.
His last salary was in the $150,000 to $160,000 range.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at it that way, is he saying if he's willing to settle for that amount, is he not confident in his chances of an appeal going in his favor? Because again, it's a risk reward for him too. He could go to the table, hey, I can make $3 million. I could also make nothing.
Right. Yeah, I think that my sense is that he just kind of wants to be made whole. I don't think he has, he wants to do further harm and damage or whatever, but his annualized salary with benefits, 30%, let's say, is about $210,000. So 125 is probably about 60% of that, and he lost about a half a year's of employment just in 2016. When his employment ended on June 30th. So I can't say what Mr. Hartman is thinking or what his intentions or thoughts are. For the most part, I have theories, but at this point, there's a question in his mind whether he'll prevail or not, because he has not prevailed when he wanted to pursue an injunction and when he filed a lawsuit. So now this is his third time at bat. I think he pursued the appeal because he's feeling like potentially that the odds might be in his favor to win, but there's no guarantee. Nobody can guarantee us one way or another what the outcome of that would be. So, you know, the insurance company will normally put up, they've got a $50,000 coverage on lost wages. They've upped that to $60,000. They're in favor of a settlement. Our original attorneys, who were represented by MIIA, which is a branch off of the Mass Municipal Association, and they defended us in the first case, but they're in favor of the settlement. The arbiter is in favor of the settlement. Obviously, the outside attorney we brought in to examine all of this could have said, nope, pursue the appeal or settle it, and their recommendation is to settle it. So, you know, if it's $65,000 out of our pocket at this point, then again, it's a business decision. What do we do? Not admitting, you know, right, wrong, or guilt or not. You know, was it the right action to take or not? It's just, you know, how do we come to a conclusion on this?
So we have a couple minutes left. I want to give you time to make a final pitch to voters. But in the meantime, I want to, final question, ask on both candidates in this selectman's race have family ties in certain other areas in town. And I just wanted to ask you to address your wife, Anita, also running for re-election this campaign season on the school committee, to just address any perceived conflicts that may arise there from having a husband on the Board of Selectmen, a wife on the school committee.
So again, good question, Jeff. My wife, Anita, is a wonderful person, so I would never say anything bad about her. We don't find it a conflict at all. So, and again, even to the point of the confidentiality of the things that we both deal with. So we felt, again, and it sounds like a broken record, but we've been given a lot, and we just think it's important to give back. So volunteering is our way of doing that. So if I have skills, experience, and education that helps, or things that help lend to accomplishing things in town, then I'm happy to do that. Anita feels the same way. And again, she's negotiated the contracts for the unions, contracts for the schools. They just hired a new superintendent. They've gone through a pretty methodical process there, and she has done just a yeoman's job in terms of executing on the school committee. So
we have about a little less than 30 seconds. Want to give you a chance to have the final word.
Sure. So I appreciate the opportunity to be a servant of the town, and to work on the Board of Selectmen. We've accomplished a lot. We work at a breakneck speed. There's so much left to do. This board works very well together, and we do a good job of checking each other in addition to making sure we're fully informed. So I want to continue to do this job and to finish the work that we started, and I'm asking for your vote on April 9th. Thank you.
Well, Rick, thank you so much for joining me, and thank you for tuning in to this episode of Stoughton Spotlight, our conversations with the candidates. Again, 2 candidates running for a single seat on the Board of Selectmen in this April 2019 town election. Make sure to watch our other episode with the other candidate, Joe McCrisky, as well. And again, Election Day is April 9th, 2019, and be sure to vote. Thanks so much for watching.